Welcome back to the OU Insider YouTube channel, and welcome back to Quick Slants alongside Jesse Crittenden. I am Parker Thune, and our goal with this video series, of course, is to bring you quick, digestible 10 to 15-minute breakdowns of all of the relevant angles as the Sooners continue to get closer and closer to the dawn of the spring football season on March 22nd. And in the comments section of our last video, many of you had questions about the secondary, what it's going to look like, who some of the key contributors are going to be, who's going to take that next step, and especially, I think the question that everybody has right now, Jesse, about the secondary more so than any other individual question is, who starts opposite Woody Washington at cornerback? Obviously, Washington is a guy that had some NFL draft stock after his redshirt sophomore year, but elected to come back last year, was good for the most part, not really good enough to truly cement himself as a draft prospect. And so now he returns in 2023 as a fifth-year senior. He'll be entering his fourth season as a starter at cornerback for Oklahoma. But with the loss of C.J. Colden to the NFL, there is that lingering question as to whether it's Gentry Williams or Kendall Dolby or Kenai Walker or what have you that ends up at the other cornerback position opposite Woody Washington. So as you take stock of the cornerback room right now, what do you see?
Yeah, no, I think when I look at the secondary, we've talked about linebackers and we've talked about the defensive line. I think two areas that there is potential there, but also some question marks. I think at defensive back, I think it's one of the strongest positions on the team. I really do. I think with not only the amount of experience and also carryover from last year, but I think you really have a lot of different levels of experience and a lot of young guys that are coming in, and I think you're excited about. But when I look at defensive back, or especially cornerback, really, I feel pretty good about that position. I think all those names that you just mentioned, I think are guys that are going to be able to step up. I think Kenai Walker is a guy that the program is really excited about. Didn't see the field a ton last year, but I think he's a guy that they're really excited about. Honestly, Kendall Dolby, interesting guy coming out of NEO. But I mean, I think he had an incredible career with NEO. I think he's a guy that brings a ton of athleticism. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit of a jump to come to OU, but he's honestly kind of a guy that I have my eye on. And then, I mean, yeah, you mentioned Gentry Williams. I think to me, it's going to be interesting to see how all this shakes out. But I think Gentry Williams, I think he's the guy I kind of have my eye on the most, maybe of that group. What do you see?
No, I think between Gentry Williams and Gavin Sawchuk, the word from within is that those two are neck and neck for the title of fastest player on the entire roster. And we've known that Gentry Williams has speed to burn. Obviously, the medical situation that he had in workouts dating back about a week, that's something that folks are going to have some concerns over. But from everything that we've been told, talking to sources within the program, people in the know, it doesn't seem like that's the kind of thing that's going to hold him back in the long term, more just a one-off type of deal where he overexerted himself, and not something that is going to be of preeminent worry to anybody on the coaching staff or involved with the football program as we roll into the fall. So hopefully things continue to progress along that direction, and he is thoroughly uninhibited, able to get back on the field quickly and join the Sooners right away for the beginning of spring ball on March 22nd. I don't really see any reason why that wouldn't be the case, just given the way that his recovery has progressed in the few days since that incident occurred. But I think Williams is certainly the guy that has the highest ceiling at that position. To be honest, looking at Dolby, that may be the guy that is most ready to play. And you throw in Jaden Davis as well, the fifth-year senior. I'll be honest, I don't know what you can count on out of a guy like that, just because there's been one constant for Jaden Davis over the last 3 seasons. And unfortunately, that constant is he's been unseated as a starter in each of those 3 seasons by Woody Washington in 2020, by, well, a multiplicity of guys in 2021, and then, of course, by C.J. Colden in 2022. So Jaden Davis, I'm not sure that's the guy that you can necessarily count on being the starter opposite Woody Washington, but Dolby is a guy that was a junior college All-American, comes in ready to play the position, comes in with experience all around the secondary at the JUCO level. And so if you're talking about a plug-and-play option, somebody that you can stick opposite Woody right off the bat and know that he's going to be able to hold his own against the top receivers in the Big 12, I think that guy's probably Kendall Dolby, but I will say this. It would not shock me if you see a lot of Makari Vickers very early on, because that is a top 100 signee out of the state of Florida for the Sooners. Saw him at the All-American Bowl at the beginning of January down in San Antonio. That is a guy that is college ready. And not only is he college ready, but he's so mentally advanced and so aggressive, so physical at the line of scrimmage that I think he brings a dimension within his game that the Sooners just don't have in the cornerback room naturally right now. I think that there are guys that certainly have their strengths as defensive backs, but you're talking about a guy that has the combination of size, speed, physicality, and just natural athleticism and feel for the position that could make him an all-conference type of contributor, or even an All-American down the line. I think Makari Vickers has to be the first guy that you highlight. So it would not surprise me if the Sooners end up giving him a lot of run very early on in the season. Now, no, go ahead.
No, sorry, Parker. I completely agree with you, and I think obviously, I think we've seen it's only just been 1 year, but I think we've seen obviously what this coaching staff really values, and I think they really value experience, right? And you mentioned Jaden Davis. I think Jaden Davis is a guy that's nice to have in the locker room. He's a nice guy to have within the program, but not a guy that I think is probably not going to see a ton of the field compared to those other guys. But yeah, so with that being said, I think Kendall Dolby, I think you're right. I think they're going to really value his experience. I think they're going to value him as a guy that can maybe come in right away. But also, I think what happens at defensive back that you may not have as much at other positions, as you mentioned, Makari Vickers. I think there are young guys, freshmen and sophomores, young guys that are, I think, a little bit more ready to play and have a little bit more potential to make an impact pretty quickly, maybe even compared to other positions.
And you talked about the experience factor. I'll add this with regard to the cornerbacks. It wouldn't shock me if the Sooners try to bring in a 1-year rental post-spring, another experienced guy to at least provide some additional depth. And obviously not just depth, but another guy that has played the position at a high level, kind of has the acumen and the savvy to be able to be a contributor if that's something deemed necessary for Oklahoma post-spring. Now, speaking of transfers, the Sooners brought in a transfer at the safety position in Reggie Pearson from Texas Tech. I believe he was previously at South Dakota, if I'm not mistaken. So goes South Dakota to Texas Tech and will now spend his 6th and final year of collegiate eligibility at Oklahoma. And this is a guy that's a really talented football player, a really versatile football player, and plays bigger than his frame. Jesse, a guy that Brent Venables has already said they're going to work him at Cheetah. They're going to try him at Cheetah as well as at safety. So you look at Reggie Pearson, how much of an impact do you think he has in his lone season as a Sooner?
Yeah, no, again, I think it kind of goes to what we've talked about I think they're really going to value experience. And obviously I think he's a guy that's been to obviously a couple of different places. Obviously we've seen the impact he can have against OU specifically, with the hit he put on Dylan Gabriel. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good to highlight him because, again, not to say that young guys aren't going to get opportunities. It's not to say that young guys can't come in and make an impact. But I think Reggie Pearson fits the mold of a guy who has experience at the D1 level, who's made an impact. And I think he's exactly the type of guy that, especially when coming after a 6-7 season where the program is really trying to build, I think he's a guy who is most ready to make an impact right away. And also I think be maybe a good mentor, or maybe a guy that can kind of show those younger guys at the position kind of how it's done.
It's very abundantly clear at this point that Billy Bowman is going to be one of your starting safeties at Oklahoma in 2023. He's one of the highest ceiling defenders on the entire roster for OU. When he's been fully healthy, he has been wondrous. I rewind to the Bedlam game last year and the interception that he had where he essentially played center field on Spencer Sanders and streaked from out of nowhere to pick that ball off. One of 4 interceptions the Sooners had that night against the Cowboys' talented quarterback. And that was one of the best individual plays by any Oklahoma football player all year long. That was Billy Bowman's ceiling in a nutshell, right there. So he's locked in as a starter. That's a virtual guarantee. I ask you, though, Jesse, who starts alongside Billy Bowman? Because I think there are 3 or 4 guys that are going to have a case.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And honestly, I think, man, you look at, if you've got a bunch of different names in that room, and again, it comes back to, I think, how excited or maybe how much potential that group really does have, and you look at the growth that group had last year. I think you kind of have a bunch of different options. I think, my first thought would have been maybe someone like Peyton Bowen, who Brent Venables absolutely raved about and talked about how he's kind of built differently than other freshmen in terms of being, he just understands the game. He sees it a little different. But Peyton talked about, I think he's going to be moved around a little bit. He's talked about even maybe making an impact at Cheetah too. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see where they kind of put him. But I think he's a guy that can make an impact at safety right away. Is it somebody like Damon Harmon? Is it somebody like, is it Key Lawrence? It's hard to, I think you have a lot of options at that position, but I think if Peyton Bowen, I really think, unless he gets slotted in at Cheetah and that's where he spends a lot of his time, I really think he's a guy that can maybe take that spot.
Now, Damon Harmon is a guy that gets lost in the shuffle and forgotten when you're talking about the safety room. But with as much as he saw the field for Oklahoma in 2022 and just the physical tools that he brings to the table, his issue for the first couple of years has been, well, obviously he suffered what was at the time a pretty scary injury against TCU. Fortunately, it wasn't anything more severe than a concussion and only held him out for a couple of games. But aside from the injury, I think the concern that many have had about Damon Harmon over his first couple of years at Oklahoma was he was maybe still a little bit too wiry to be playing safety at the Power 5 level. I think he checked in at 168 pounds before fall camp his freshman year. So he needed to pack on weight. Obviously, in year 2 in Jerry Schmidt's workout regimen, that shouldn't be a top flight issue or concern for Damon Harmon. And so that's a guy that's easy to forget about back there, but could have a huge impact for Oklahoma at the safety position if he is able to go into camp and outpace the likes of a Key Lawrence and a Peyton Bowen. And I think another guy, man, that didn't see the field as much as I expected him to as a true freshman last year will be Robert Spears-Jennings. You want to talk about a big-bodied safety, man. Robert Spears-Jennings is a safety with a linebacker's build. And a guy that, if you recall it, when he went to the Under Armour All-American game after his senior year of high school, he won the fastest man competition. Ran a 4.43, I want to say. And I remember talking to Rob after that happened, and he said, yeah, man, my hamstring was kind of bugging me. I bet I could have run a couple hundredths of a second faster if I was 100%. So you combine the size, the speed, and the willingness to initiate contact and come downhill. Robert Spears-Jennings, to me, is one of the highest ceiling players on the entire roster, right there alongside Billy Bowman. So I think if the production can match the potential, and if the reps on the practice field can match the potential, Spears-Jennings is a guy that'll push heavily. And I think the biggest question everybody has right now with the safety position in particular is how quickly does Peyton Bowen prove too good to keep down on the depth chart? Because football just comes obnoxiously easy to that kid. And there's going to be an adjustment. There always is. Yeah, he was playing the position at a high level in the state of Texas in the high school circuit, but high school to Power 5 football is still a pretty big jump. If it comes pretty naturally for Peyton Bowen, though, and that's a guy that you're going to see on the field quite a bit, even as a true freshman, and also a guy that I think is going to have a big impact in the return game, assuming he's not starting. I don't think Brent Venables, after what happened with Billy Bowman last year, is going to be all that eager to trot out a return man that's also one of his starting defenders. But if Peyton Bowen doesn't start, I think he is a factor in the return game, and that is an area of the game in which he is very dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than anybody Oklahoma currently has on the roster. In a more macro sense here, Jesse, it feels for almost a decade, maybe over a decade now, as if the secondary has been the primary position group that's kind of held Oklahoma back, or at least been the most consistent bugaboo and the most consistent knock on that program. So if the secondary is what we expect it to be in 2023 for Oklahoma, how much better of a football team are they than they were in 2022?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, and it's not only just been maybe a lack of depth or a lack of elite talent at that position, but it's also just been, I think at times, a lack of positioning, a lack of maybe elite coaching at that position. They're just things that you look at that secondary in past years that just it hasn't been there. It was always going to hold OU back. I really don't think that's going to be the case this year. And I actually think if you look last year at the position groups that maybe saw the most improvement, I honestly think it's the secondary. And now you pretty much are going to add to that with a little bit more experience and a little bit more young talent coming in. And so, I mean, I actually think that the secondary could end up being kind of the strong part of the OU defense next season. And I think I mean, again, the secondary, I mean, you need every position group to kind of do their part, but I think the secondary started a little slow. And as the season went along, progressed, I don't think we're going to see a slow start this year. I think they're going to be a group that makes an impact right away, maybe the biggest impact in terms of consistency. And I think that's going to do wonders for how that defense is as a whole. Again, you've got a lot of carryover from last year. This is year 2 for guys like Billy Bowman and Brent Venables' defense, and now you're adding some young talent into that. I don't think there's any reason to not be incredibly excited about the potential of that group. Now, that's not to say it's going to be perfect every game. It's not to say that there's not still going to be some things here and there, but when I look at the defense, I think the secondary is going to be the group that has the biggest impact right away, and I think in some ways will be the strong part of this defense.
I'll add this as well, and this is something that I truly did not expect, but incoming freshman defensive back and early enrollee Josiah Wagner is a guy that has really captured some attention throughout the workout sessions. And Brandon Drum and I talked to Wagner's father at the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio, and he essentially told us, look, I expect my kid to redshirt. And Josiah Wagner is a guy that checked in at 5'10", 162 pounds when he first showed up to campus. So there needs to be some physical development there, but make no mistake, Wagner is a guy that is turning heads early in the process. So that may be another guy that contributes as a true freshman when nobody really expects it, along the lines of our Mason Thomas last year. That's your first look at the secondary here on Quick Slants. For Jesse Crittenden, I am Parker Thune. Come on back with us tomorrow. We'll hit receivers. And again, leave comments down below in this video and in tomorrow's video, and let us know what you want us to discuss next on this video series as we get closer and closer, just a week away now, from spring football at the University of Oklahoma. We'll see you next time.